You ever get a figure you think it's just going to be an absolute goddamn soulless disaster, but then it winds up becoming the favorite thing of your entire collection? For me, that's definitely Siege Hotshot. This version of Siege Hotshot is the absolute super Chad Cybertronian guard version, not whatever the fuck this thing is supposed to be. And I could give you a belabored introduction of the entire history of the Unicron trilogy, but the only thing I literally remember about it is a shitty version of Hotshot and never wanting to collect it again. This is my first technical kind of sort of half delve into the Unicron trilogy, and I have to say it does have some really goddamn cool designs. The Cybertron Optimus Prime I got earlier this year was okay, but in all honesty, it felt a bit soulless compared to the original because it's a Combiner Wars parts forming Ultra Magnus retool. But Cybertron Hotshot, oh my god! This thing proves that hope really isn't dead, even if something's just meant to be a repaint. This version of Hotshot was an armored military vehicle, but making it out of the Hound mold seemed like a really stupid decision when I first saw the promo images of this thing. With that being said, how does the vehicle mode pan out? The first thing I want to talk about in this figure is the goddamn paint scheme, because as much as a military Jeep shouldn't have a light shade of blue, the blue on this thing is absolute pure best Hotshot paint of the year. That's partially because it's the only Hotshot repaint of the year, but let's not talk about that. The glossy paint scheme on this thing definitely feels like a Cybertron toy, and this thing is also a pretty chunky deluxe, albeit kind of small for the most part. One thing I will give the Unicron trilogy credit for was the fact that they had zero hollow bits on anything. These things are some of the goddamn chunkiest deluxes you will ever see in your entire life. Although I have to admit, I would like to see what this thing would look like if it were made out of the Siege Ironhide mold. The Autobot logo painted on the front right part of the hood of the truck is definitely the best painted Autobot logo I've seen in my collection. It is so clean and crisp and just perfect in every possible way, and unlike Power of the Prime's Ricochet, I realized during the filming of this review that the Autobot logo has no paint chipping whatsoever on it. As for the weapons, he comes with the exact same ones as Hound, but I wish he came with an entire additional arsenal. If they could have made a weaponizer that transformed into show-accurate armor, then I would have paid $40 for this thing, hands down. The sculpted detail on the front of the vehicle is absolute god tier. The amazing painted silver, the painted headlights, the amount of detail on this thing is just mythical. The wheels on the sides of the thing are a little bit high up though, and they do have some gaps in between them. This should allow them to roll a lot better, but of course, you know me, I never get a vehicle mode that can goddamn roll. This thing doesn't quite clean up as well as a Hound mold either. It does have some seam lines that are kind of unsightly, but it's in some nitpicky areas that you would have to really search to complain about. And the back of the vehicle mode is hollow. You might call this nitpicking, but I really hate it when the front or back of any vehicle mode is hollow. When I try to get low dramatic angle shots on this thing, would you really want this to be the image I get out of it? Fucking no. So anyways, let's take a look at that transformation. Growing up, I really didn't see what the appeal behind the Hotshot design was until they came out with a Cybertron guard version of him. Good god, take a look at this frickin' kingly head sculpt. I love the yellow semi-crown that goes around the entire side of his head. The eyes are painted gorgeously. And the sculpting on his head is incredibly intense. Something I've noticed out of Earthrise is that the head sculpts are kind of starting to go a little bit downhill and be a lot more muted in detail. Like, yes, it's toon accurate, but I don't care about toon accuracy. I just want it to look good. I really didn't expect the short, stocky build to work as well on this thing, and I'll admit I do have some problems with it in comparison to the absolute goddamn unit that was the original version of this thing. Something I goddamn love about the paint scheme on this robot mode is the fact that it changes the color palette of the vehicle mode and gives it some red and blue highlights. It seems to come out of nowhere, and it really shakes things up and makes the transformation seem that much more interesting. He does share the same battle damage that Siege Hound had, and I don't like the fact that they decided to go in this direction. I mean, this is supposed to be a Cybertron toy. Say what you will about them, but they were some of the most brick-solid quality figures in terms of plastic density and paint of all time. This is, of course, despite their lack of articulation, which this figure manages to improve on substantially. His head's on a ball joint, the shoulders rotate and move out, bicep bend and rotation, wrist rotation and waist rotation, universal hips, double jointed knees, and foot tilt that is absolutely ridiculous. Given the wide base of support that this robot mode has, this thing is an absolute cakewalk to animate with. I don't even feel like I need to use sticky tack, but I choose to anyways because it helps things out a little bit. Things also have an incredibly easy time managing to tab in perfectly, and that's something else I really admire about this figure. I know the Cybertron figures didn't have any hollow parts, and this thing does have somewhat hollow backs of the legs, but I feel like this was a component that was necessary to allow them to wrap around themselves in the cool and innovative way that they do. And since this is a Siege figure, it means you can give him an absolute metric buttload of weapons, like always. Something I talk a lot about on this channel is how user-friendly the animation process for a figure is, and this thing has some of the most perfectly balanced joints of all time. I can't think of a single complaint on anything, except for the outward shoulder movement, which kinda bends the hinge that the shoulder is attached to a little bit. This is made of soft plastic, and if you're really gonna hand fist the thing, you could wind up breaking it off. But that's something that you would have to really be stupid in order to actually do. The proportions on the thing are kind of short and stocky in comparison to the original, but I think they managed to make it work a lot better than I thought they would. Siege Hound does not seem like the fitting body type for Hotshot in any way, shape, or form, especially with this Super Chad alpha male version of him. But there is an upgrade kit available to make him most sure accurate, which I highly recommend, and it'll probably cost me my goddamn arm. I really thought the aftermarket was gonna kill this thing and make me not want to get it anymore, but I'm actually kind of surprised. You can still find the guy for a reasonable price on Amazon, so if you can find this jam-loving jackass, then I highly recommend getting him. The paint job is immaculate, the sculpting is absolute god tier, and even though the proportions are a little bit shorter and stumpier than the original version of this mold, and you're gonna need to get the upgrade kit to give him his infinity billion weapons to really pull the look off, I'd say this thing is definitely a worthwhile investment if you plan on getting the upgrade kit. And as much as Hasbro tends to go on soulless pandering repaints or retools of figures that don't really work, this felt like there was some passion and effort and heart put into it. This has been a stop motion reviewer with my review on Siege Hotshot. Get ready for Rat next week, because I got my first Beast Wars figure coming, ladies and gentlemen. That's right, I'm becoming a shittier version of Prime vs. Prime and Tauntaun now.